this question of TikTok is coming to a head now. Any buyer would have to really demonstrate a complete separation from China. How would they go about doing that? What would be the process once this sale were to actually emerge if ByteDance and China agree?
I mean, it's such an interesting question, and it came up in the Supreme Court hearing last week. And the TikTok lawyer said he did not even think it was possible to divest or separate TikTok from the owner ByteDance. He said it could take years if it's even possible. So at the same time, the U.S. Solicitor General in those same hearings said that she thought that maybe the Chinese government was playing this game of chicken and might at the last minute float some sort of alternative. But, you know, the TikTok lawyer, I think, sort of shot themselves a little bit in the foot in the sense that he said, this is really complicated. And as your last guest was just saying, essentially, the U.S. TikTok is ByteDance, and the Chinese government now stepping in at this stage is confirming what the members of Congress thought a year ago and years ago, which is that there is this Chinese government control over a U.S. social media company. It's hard to see how you can do that, certainly not by the 19th, and as the TikTok lawyer said, if at all.
Sarah, how would this fit into the broader exchange and relationship between Washington and Beijing over matters including trade and other technology-related security issues? Is this something that China could offer, perhaps as a bargaining chip as Trump takes office?
Yeah, I think it's pretty savvy in two ways. One is that they're very mindful of the influence that Elon Musk has as an advisor in the incoming administration, but also that the incoming administration really seems to want to be making some like opening a door for better relations with China. Both of these countries in the last several years, including in the first term of the Trump administration, technology really was at the center of this rivalry. And so they've gone back and forth, and TikTok is emblematic of this rivalry. But we see this in the chip space, in particular in the chip space and AI. Just yesterday that the administration, the White House, the Biden administration in its last days issued a new policy, an AI diffusion policy, trying to make it more difficult for China to access U.S.-made chips.
I want to reiterate to our audience that, of course, no comments have been made by, thus far, the Chinese officials. We know that Elon Musk hasn't responded to this report, and indeed ByteDance itself has called it fiction. But I am interested, Sarah, to push us forward. What the outcome seems to be of a potential TikTok ban has been a movement onto other Chinese-owned social media companies. How big a national security issue is that, then?
Well, it's interesting to me. Either they don't understand the law, or they are banking on the fact that it will be just too difficult to enforce. Because last week on TikTok, they were trying to push people to Lemonade, which is also ByteDance owned. Now they're trying to push people to RedNote, also Chinese owned. And so all of those social media platforms would be covered under the law. There must just be an assumption that enforcement of this will just be a cat and mouse game. Right. And maybe the incoming Trump administration, who again seems warm to the idea of, or has looked and indicated that they don't support the ban, might just turn a blind eye to these kind of complicated ownership structures, or what's RedNote or what's Lemonade, oh, that's Chinese owned, and just kind of staying enough behind it that something gets to perpetuate it. But at the same time, what I think the members of the national security risk here was that you had 170 million Americans in one space. And actually, to the extent that they migrate elsewhere, that's actually a win.
Interestingly, Xiaohongshu, or RedNote as it's known, it seems to be organic movement, actually, going over to that particular app. It's not related to ByteDance, but as you note, Lemonade certainly is. So push us forward as to, you said how difficult it is to disentangle US TikTok from ultimately the rest of the parent company. China has some sort of authority here, even though, of course, there's not much direct ownership over ByteDance, but because they can control who gets to have access to algorithms sold by Chinese companies. Do you think in any way the Chinese would ever want its algorithm held by a US company, whether it's Elon Musk owned or otherwise?
No, I just don't see that scenario because it's too lucrative. That essentially TikTok is this very sophisticated and very effective algorithm. And this is highly valuable to ByteDance. And there's no incentive for them other than to keep operating in the US, but to share any of that. And so I don't, again, as the lawyer himself said last week, I don't see how you can actually disentangle these, because then TikTok, without that algorithm, just becomes any other social media platform.